They don't always look like villains. In fact, most of them look perfectly ordinary, charming, confident, even kind. They know how to smile, how to listen, how to make you feel special. And that's exactly how they win. A narcissist doesn't reveal themselves through arrogance alone. They reveal themselves through patterns, subtle, almost invisible shifts in behavior that only make sense once you're already caught in their web. They don't take control by shouting. They do it by making you question your worth. They make you chase their approval, one silent test at a time, until your emotions begin to revolve around their moods. You start mistaking chaos for passion, control for care, and emotional exhaustion for love. But here's the truth most people never see. Narcissists don't just want attention, they want reflection, a mirror that constantly feeds their image. They thrive when you're confused, compliant, independent, and every word, every reaction, every apology you give becomes another piece of the mirror they need to survive. In this video, we'll expose 7 hidden signs you might be dealing with a narcissist. Behaviors so subtle, most people miss them until the damage is already done. Once you recognize these signs, you'll see what lies beneath the charm, and you'll never look at their mask the same way again. It rarely starts with manipulation. It starts with fascination. At first, the narcissist feels magnetic. Their attention feels brighter, sharper, more intense than anyone else's. They study you, not to know you, but to learn how to use you. They notice what makes you laugh, what makes you feel safe, what makes you open up. And once they know your emotional code, they begin to program it. They don't rush. They make you believe it's real. They mirror your personality, your opinions, your humor, even your pain. You start thinking, I've finally met someone who understands me. But what you're really seeing is your own reflection, carefully projected back at you. Then slowly, the energy changes. The warmth cools. The attention fades. You start working harder to get back what used to come effortlessly. You become more accommodating, more forgiving, more afraid to lose their approval. You think you're repairing the relationship, but what you're really doing is training yourself to obey their emotional rules. This is the psychological trap of narcissism. You are conditioned to depend on the person who breaks you. They create the pain, then become the only source of its relief. They wound your confidence, then make you grateful for every small act of kindness. And in that emotional confusion, they begin to rewrite your sense of reality. You stop asking, is this right? You start asking, what did I do wrong? That shift, from questioning them to questioning yourself, is where the real control begins. Most people never notice when it happens. Because narcissists don't destroy you all at once. They do it slowly, piece by piece, until you can't remember what it felt like to be free. To truly see a narcissist, you have to look beneath the charm, beneath the confidence, the charisma, and the perfectly curated image. Because what hides underneath isn't confidence, it's hunger, a constant, desperate need to feed their fragile ego. And to do that, they rely on 7 psychological tactics. Subtle enough to look normal, but powerful enough to control anyone who doesn't see them coming. The first hidden sign is false empathy. They appear caring, attentive, emotionally intelligent. They ask about your pain, your past, your fears, not out of compassion, but curiosity. Every answer you give becomes data. They're learning what to imitate, what to avoid, and what to use later when they need to disarm you. Their empathy is a mask, not a feeling, but a function. The second sign is strategic vulnerability. They'll tell you stories about how they were betrayed, misunderstood, or broken by others. You'll feel protective of them. You'll want to heal what someone else destroyed. But that's the trap. The more you try to fix them, the more control they gain. Because every time you comfort them, they reinforce the illusion that your love can save them. And once you believe that, you'll tolerate almost anything. The third sign is selective kindness. They know exactly when to be generous, affectionate, and attentive. Their kindness isn't random, it's reinforcement. It appears right after conflict, right when you start pulling away, right when you're about to question the relationship. That sudden warmth resets your brain, makes you doubt your instincts, and convinces you that maybe it was all just a misunderstanding. But that's not reconciliation, it's control through relief. The fourth sign is subtle devaluation. They won't insult you outright. Instead, they'll make small comments that plant doubt. You're overthinking again. Relax, it's not that deep. Why are you so sensitive? At first, you laugh it off. But over time, those little cuts start to bleed. You begin to shrink yourself. to think less, feel less, express less, because every time you do, they make you feel foolish for it. That's how narcissists train silence, not through threats, but through ridicule. The fifth sign is emotional unpredictability. One day they're affectionate, attentive, almost magnetic. The next they're cold, distant, or irritated without reason. You spend your days guessing which version of them you'll get. That unpredictability is not chaos. It's control. It keeps your nervous system hooked, always chasing equilibrium, always walking on psychological glass. The sixth sign is image obsession. Narcissists care more about how things look than how they are. They'll go to great lengths to protect their public persona, posting the perfect photos, saying all the right things, playing the role of the ideal partner, friend, or leader. Behind closed doors, it's different. But if you ever try to expose the truth, they'll use that same image to discredit you. They rely on their charm as a shield and on your silence as validation. And the seventh sign, the most dangerous one, is calculated confusion. They twist stories, change timelines, deny promises. They say something one day and act like it never happened the next. You start keeping mental notes, replaying conversations, trying to prove what's real. But they'll always find a way to turn the spotlight back on you. You become the unstable one, the emotional one, the problem. And once that narrative is in place, their control is complete. These seven signs are the invisible architecture of narcissistic manipulation. Each one is designed to achieve a single goal, to make you doubt your perception and depend on theirs. Because once they own your version of reality, they don't need to dominate you. You'll do it yourself. Most people never recognize these signs until they've already changed, until they've become quieter, smaller, more anxious, and can't quite remember when it started. But here's the truth. What feels like confusion isn't weakness, it's evidence. Proof that your intuition is fighting to wake you up. And once it does, everything begins to look different. Have you ever found yourself explaining your feelings to someone who never really listens, but somehow always makes you feel like the difficult one? Have you ever walked away from a conversation more confused than when it began, even though you did everything right, said everything calmly, tried so hard to be fair? That's what it feels like when you're dealing with a narcissist. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just quiet exhaustion, the kind that builds slowly, the kind that teaches you to speak less, to need less, to become smaller just to keep the peace. Maybe you've noticed it too. How you start apologizing for your own emotions. How you replay arguments in your head, wondering if you did overreact, or if maybe you are too sensitive. You start defending them to friends, explaining that they're just under pressure, that they don't really mean it, that you're just not on the same page. But deep down, you know that's not true. You've started living in their emotional climate, adjusting your tone, your words, even your facial expressions depending on their mood. You anticipate reactions before they happen. You measure peace in moments of quiet, not in genuine happiness. And if you're honest, that kind of peace feels more like tension than safety. There's a reason for that. Your body knows before your mind does. That tightness in your chest when they walk in, that small pause before you speak. Those are warning signals. Your intuition is whispering what your logic is trying to explain away. Something here is not right. You may have started to lose yourself without even realizing it. The person you used to be, confident, warm, expressive, has been buried under layers of doubt and control. You tell yourself you're staying because you care, because you're strong enough to help them, because things will go back to how they were. But the truth is, you're staying because you've been conditioned to confuse chaos with connection. That's how narcissistic relationships work. They don't take your freedom all at once. They convince you to surrender it one boundary at a time. And when you look in the mirror, you barely recognize the person looking back. Not because you're weak, but because you've been rewritten. This is the moment most people begin to wake up. The moment the illusion starts to crack. The moment you realize that love isn't supposed to feel like surveillance, that empathy shouldn't be used as a leash, and that real connection never needs to be earned through pain. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that awareness, as painful as it is the first sign that your mind is beginning to heal. Freedom from a narcissist doesn't begin with leaving. It begins with seeing. Once you see the pattern, you start to reclaim control. Because the moment you stop reacting emotionally to their games, the manipulation begins to lose its power. Narcissists thrive on your reaction, your anger, your confusion. your pain. Every time you defend, explain, or justify, you're feeding the system that keeps you trapped. The first step to freedom is silence. Not the silence they use to punish, but the silence you use to observe. You stop explaining yourself to people who twist your words. You stop trying to prove your worth to those who only recognize it when it benefits them. You begin to realize that clarity doesn't need validation. The second step is emotional detachment. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop participating in the illusion. You stop trying to win arguments that were never meant to be fair. You stop seeking closure from people who profit from confusion. You stop being the mirror they use to see themselves. The third step is boundary reconstruction. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors with locks. You choose who enters and you decide when. You stop explaining your no. You stop apologizing for self-respect. You learn that walking away isn't cruelty. It's clarity. Then comes the hardest part, rebuilding your sense of self. After manipulation, even your thoughts can feel foreign. You question your instincts, your emotions, your strength. But that's the residue of conditioning, not the truth of who you are. You are not broken. You were programmed to doubt yourself, and now you're learning to trust again. You start small. You notice your emotions without judgment. You set tiny boundaries, saying no, not replying instantly, choosing peace over explanation. Each act of self-respect rewires your mind. Each quiet decision reminds you that your worth was never theirs to define. And slowly the fog lifts. You begin to feel the return of something you thought you'd lost forever, yourself. The calm that follows isn't empty. It's honest. You stop waiting for their validation because you no longer need it. You start understanding that the power they once held was only borrowed, and now it's returning home. Freedom from narcissistic control doesn't come with anger or revenge. It comes with understanding. Once you understand the game, you no longer have to play it. You stop reacting. You stop chasing. You stop feeding the illusion. And that's when their power fades. Because a narcissist cannot survive where there is no reflection. One day you'll look back and realize that none of it was love. It was control disguised as care, attention wrapped in ego, affection used as currency. You'll remember the confusion, the guilt, the endless search for approval. And you'll wonder how you ever mistook it for connection. But that's how manipulation works. It doesn't take you by force. It convinces you to surrender, piece by piece, until you forget that you ever had power. It tells you that peace means obedience, that love means endurance, that silence means safety. The truth is much simpler and far more painful. You were never hard to love. You were just easy to control. And now you see it. You see how every word, every gesture, every sudden shift in tone was designed to test your reality. You see how the person who claimed to love you was really feeding off your reflection. You see how your empathy became their weapon and how your awareness has now become your armor. That's the final transformation. Not revenge, not hatred, just clarity. Because once you understand how narcissists work, you stop seeing them as powerful. You start seeing them as hollow. Their need for admiration isn't dominance, it's desperation. Their charm isn't confidence, it's camouflage. And the moment you recognize that, their hold over you breaks. You stop trying to fix them. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop confusing pain with passion. And in that silence, the same silence they once used to control you, you find peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on their approval, but the kind that comes from knowing you'll never let your mind be played again. They control through confusion. You win through clarity. Protect your mind, understand their game.